glucose tolerance and intolerance matters.
These signs or earliest markers of becoming pre-diabetic.
Well, that's an interesting fact that in 2022, the WHO announced that 14% of people above the age of 18 years old are having diabetes.
You have to understand the science behind and tackle it from a multi-pronged approach. If they fix their carb ingestion, they should be able to regulate that glucose better, which does not happen.
Hi, welcome back to The Wellness Blueprint, a podcast by The Wellness Co, where we break down all things health and wellness. Today, I'm joined by two of our preeminent doctors here at The Wellness Co, Dr. Srishti and Dr. Nivedita. And we're going to be digging into one of the most overlooked health and wellness topics that I think all of us are very familiar with these days is blood sugar and glucose management. So whether you're aiming for more stable energy, better recovery, clearer skin, reliable mood, or simply a better quality of life, managing your blood sugar intake and your glucose levels is becoming more and more important in our busy and hectic lifestyles, especially considering the kind of diets and the kind of foods available to us out there. I think more than ever today, doctors, it's becoming very important for people to be aware of what they're putting into their bodies, when they're putting it in, what kind of movement regimen or routine that they're following, and how they're able to better manage these things, even if they're not diabetic themselves. So over to you, Dr. Srishti. Maybe you can just shed a little bit of light more on why it's becoming so important in 2026.
All right. So why exactly glycemic index or glucose tolerance and intolerance matters? First and foremost thing, we talk about what a normal person without having a diabetes is expected. So it's 100 milligram per deciliter is something below that we are expecting to have somebody with a normal physiology. And when people are diabetic, we are expecting for them to have pre-meal measures around 80 to 130 milligram per deciliter, and post-meal spike can go to 180, but not beyond that. Well, that's an interesting fact that in 2022, the WHO announced that 14% of people above the age of 18 years old are having diabetes, which also makes them more prone to having more cardiovascular risk, more inflammation, and lesser recovery patterns. Now, this entire notion of having diabetes or not is not just circulated only and only to this population who's having the disease. It is also mandatory for all people who are checking up their spikes or maybe energy lows, or if they're having more fatigue, more craving. This is also accounting to what exactly your blood and your glucose levels in the body is showing you.
Right. I think it's very important for people to understand that I think these days, these signs or earliest markers of becoming pre-diabetic are not necessarily to do with your genetics or even if your parents are diabetics. Of course, that's a big area of concern, but people are developing type 2 diabetes at a very early age, and it's becoming a more and more concerning trend as the years go on. And these are some of the early markers, right? Something like what you mentioned regarding more regular energy crashes, seeing higher spikes and higher lows throughout your day, not being super active or living a very sedentary lifestyle, but not necessarily managing your sugar intake super well. These are the problem areas that people do need to kind of keep an eye on and focus on, and something that we see very regularly at the Wellness Co as well, right, Dr. Nivedita?
So I would like to explain to the audience a little bit about how does it work, how glucose regulation works. Suppose you eat some carbs and the glucose is released in your bloodstream and your pancreas get a signal to release insulin. That's the major hormone which controls the circulating blood glucose levels. So insulin will tell your cells to take up the glucose from the bloodstream so that the circulating levels are maintained at a healthy range. And if your insulin signaling is impaired, that means your body is not releasing enough insulin or your body is not responding to it adequately. That means that your circulating glucose levels will be high, leading to higher inflammation and not a proper recovery and fatigue and mental fog building up for you. So a long story short, I'd like to say that the smoother your glucose peaks and valleys are, the better are your energy levels, the better is your recovery and your mood. So you need to focus on keeping your glucose spikes regular and smooth.
I think that's some really great information for the audience, and I think it's super important that today we're going to be covering and going over what your hormones and metabolism are trying to tell you, what the key markers and some of the numbers to watch are going to be, how your movement and how interventions that you can take in your daily life help you. And we'll also talk about why it matters beyond just this risk of diabetes, as you mentioned rightly as well, because it's very important to note that glucose and insulin balance impacts everything that happens into your daily life, right? A lot of people start fixing the symptoms or start fixing, little things that are going wrong in their daily habits, but they're not necessarily looking at the root cause, or they're not able to identify because they might think that they're too young, or it doesn't make sense for them, or it doesn't fit with their kind of category of concern. But it could be coming from a insulin resistance issue. It could be coming from a higher risk of pre-diabetes, and it's very important to talk to an expert and figure out whether your body is trying to send you a message that you're not necessarily receiving, right? So what I would want to move on to is, of course, something that our audience can take away about what's actually happening when glucose goes wrong in the body, right? So what are the responses? What are the triggers to look out for? Maybe Dr. Srishti, Dr. Niveta, you can tell the audience a little bit more about that as well.
Well, what happens when the glucose metabolism is not in place? The first and foremost thing is insensitivity of the master gland that creates beta islet cells. And that is what produces insulin in your body. So when those little tiny cells are insensitive, they're not signaling the gut properly. There are hormones like GLP-1, various hormones, secretin, incretin. All of these hormones work together to make sure that our cravings, our appetites are regulated. So for somebody who has a normal glucose level or who's not diabetic is 100 mg per dl and should be less than that, of course. And post-meal for normal people, it should be way below 140 milligram per deciliter. So that are the normal ranges. But what we see as a measure in our blood is a 3-month blueprint, like we talk about. So our cells have the ability to have a remembrance and have a memory of their own. So whatever you do in those 3 months, our cells remember, our red blood cells remember. So that is what we measure, known as glycated hemoglobin, which a lot of doctors would say HbA1c. That has to be 5.7% and below for anybody who's normal and whose metabolism is nice. So what happens when somebody has 5.7% and below HbA1c? Well, we also have to see for Q points like if they are fatigued, if their recovery is less, if their inflammatory markers are more. Those are all small cues and signs to see that if you are having a nice working smooth metabolism or not. So those are the targets we actually see in people.
Right, of course. I think these are all very important things for people to understand, that a doctor or an expert can guide you with. These are the kind of separate diagnostic tests that may be required for you to undergo, for you to understand what your exact HbA1c levels are right now, what the goal or what the target level is for your specific, let's say, age bracket, or according to your height, your weight, your size, and what your health goals are as well. Because I think a lot of people start working on, let's say, weight management as a goal, right? They take up a goal like weight management. They're like, I want to lose 5 kilos or 10 kilos of weight and I want to look or be a certain way, but they're not able to achieve that and they struggle and they become frustrated. But the idea is that they don't really understand that if they're not changing their diet accordingly, or that their body is not responding to the changes that they're making accordingly, they won't see the positive effects happening, right? So this is something that, of course, Dr. Niveta, we see at the Wellness Co regularly. We have a lot of clients over the age of, let's say, 35, 40 plus. How do you kind of recommend them, and what do you commonly see in their trend and their trend patterns when they come in?
This is a tough beast to tame, let me tell you, because there are no shortcuts. You have to understand the science behind and tackle it from a multi-pronged approach. I would like to address a few things, like people think if they fix their carb ingestion, they should be able to regulate that glucose better, which does not happen. It's not as simple as that. So what I say is it's very individual how your body responds to dietary changes. And what you should focus more on is a recovery, how you recover, building your muscle mass. You still have to focus on nutrient density and keeping your stress to a minimum. Now, these are the factors which will help make a lasting impact. The second thing I would say is you need to focus on that. And also when it comes to diet, not just carbs, carbs. But if you include a portion of protein or fiber with every meal, that will help release glucose slowly into your bloodstream, and that will give the body a chance to manage your glucose spikes better. So that's one strategy. Also, a very simple hack is just doing a 2-minute walk after your meals. So something as simple as a 2-minute physical activity vis-a-vis just sitting in your place can make a lot of difference to your glucose control. So you should focus on that, and also not just focusing on HbA1c because that's a cumulative figure. And even if that is normal, you have to watch out in the long run managing metabolic flexibility and muscle mass and repair, recovery, and your moods. That's very important.
Right. I think that's very well said, because a lot of people might think that they're otherwise in great health or feeling really good or feeling great, but they're not able to explain why they're suffering from certain issues that could be going on, whether it's a sleep debt that they're carrying. And like you mentioned, they're having poor recovery. So when they are being physically active as well, they're not able to recover as well, or they feel like they're getting more tired more easily. These are very common signs of aging as well, obviously, that we see amongst older populations. And this is a key marker that says that something in your aging isn't necessarily going as right as you would want it, because a lot of people who come to the Wellness Co and say that they want to feel stronger as they age, they want to feel better as they age, they want to feel more youthful and younger, and like they did when they were 25, 26, right? But now they're in their, of course, late 30s or 40s. So the ways by which one can, let's say, start to get back to those levels has to be through a comprehensive approach. It can't just be looking at a single marker or a few different interventions here and there. It has to be an entire kind of lifestyle shift and lifestyle adaptation. So speaking of lifestyle, we wanted to talk about, of course, today, some of the lifestyle and movement strategies that a person can utilize or start to implement for smoother glucose regulation. Dr. Srishti, maybe you can help us out with this one.
Well, we have various pillars. That is, first and foremost, is nutrition. Why not we start adding some amount of protein, which could be one of the major chunks in our diet. And the second thing is fiber. Because when your gut has fiber, it would absorb each and every amino acid that a protein can break down into smaller pieces. So that would be one set of advice. And the first and foremost pillar, having small meals in various gaps, it's very important. Because once we are starving ourselves out of carbs, that is not how our glucose and our cells would remember how metabolism works, right? Mm-hmm. So small meals, and of course, no meals after 8:30, they work the best. Second thing is, whenever we're never having a movement after having our meal, that is more derogatory towards our health as somebody just having a 5 to 10 minutes of walk just around the compound area wherever they are working. So if they're too busy, it is not a reason to be too busy, because it is your health in the end. Right. These are small differences. These are small pillars that we start with. Third, and the most important pillar for recovery, is 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Because this is where everything starts. Your cortisol levels rise up in the night. They then go into your circadian rhythm, creating an entire circular motion how your body works. And once your body clock knows that you need to have this amount of sleep, your recovery, your cells, everything starts regenerating.
Right. I think another kind of very key piece of advice for people is, of course, when we talk about, let's say, longer fasting periods, what we're actually talking about is, like Dr. Srishti mentioned, having your last meal earlier in the day, not waiting to eat right before you go to sleep, because that is what causes a lot of these chain reactions that Dr. Nivedita was talking about as well, which are causing these negative inflammation patterns to emerge in the body, right? So, of course, having regular movement, giving your body a chance to digest what you have eaten in the, let's say, 5, 10, 20 minutes after you have eaten that food as well, or especially before going to sleep, that you've given ample amount of time for your body to use the energy that you have provided it with eating to actually burn off those calories, or at least kind of do a little walk or light movement to move that kind of, along in your digestive system. So it's not working against you while you're sleeping. A lot of people who complain about poor sleep actually have this habit of eating close to bedtime, or even eating sugar, which is the worst, right? Having caffeine or sugar before bedtime is obviously going to mess up your sleep. So I think these are, of course, simple interventions, but very important that people can, let's say, focus on making on a daily basis, which would probably bring them some big changes.
Yeah, so when I was talking about impaired insulin signaling, I mentioned overload. By overload, I meant pancreatic fatigue. So your pancreas, if you're eating too much carbs, too fast, without proteins, without fiber, without proper activity levels, so your pancreas have had to work non-stop. And once you do intermittent fasting, you're giving your pancreas a chance to rest and recover, so you get rid of the pancreatic fatigue. And also your body to clear off the debris or the old cells and the toxins.
I think shifting gears a little bit, I think now that we've talked about a lot of the kind of lifestyle and movement interventions that people can make, which are the smaller kind of changes and focus areas that they can implement on a daily basis to change their habits in a positive direction, which are obviously what might be causing the bulk or the majority of the negative kind of impacts that they're facing. What are some therapy and recovery modalities that they can make use of as well? If they're, let's say, starting a new movement regimen, if they're starting a new fitness regimen, if they want to get back on track, if they want to, let's say, reduce their risk of being pre-diabetic or developing type 2 diabetes, what are some things that we can help them with and support them with?
Well, that was a very nice question. We at the Wellness Co. Generally have a pyramidal structure and a triangular form of creating therapies. That is oxygenation, hydration, and circulation. So metabolism works on these three pillars, right? So therapy is like far infrared sauna. It would increase more heat in your body. When heat is increased, your blood vessels start making more blood and your circulation increases. When circulation increases, definitely your metabolism would increase. Then there are therapies like hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is like an energy house. That energy and that oxygen is given to your mitochondrial cells on a very cellular level, where somebody who's more fatigued, somebody who's more cranky and has mood swings because of the glucose spikes and dips, they would benefit a lot with HPOT. Then the third therapy I would say is whole body cryo. Now we are talking about the inflammation cascade that starts off whenever our metabolism goes haywire. So the inflammation cascade is taken care by the whole body cryotherapy where the inflammation goes down. So these are a few go-to therapies, and of course my favorite would be red light therapy, because then it penetrates 4 to 5 layers deeper into your dermis and it acts on a very cellular level where collagen is not only boosted, but there's improved circulation and people have much more improved sleeps. And this is a peer-reviewed article that I'm quoting.
That's great to hear. I think having these sorts of support mechanisms around people who are putting a plan in place. Of course, Dr. Nivedita can speak more to when we have these kind of consultations, when we have clients coming in who are suffering from various number of symptoms, which are very kind of numerous and different in their scope and size and how much the concern is. We try to kind of put together a therapy protocol for them that, of course, incorporates 3 to 4 or 5 of our science-backed therapies. And then, of course, adding in the nutritional profiling, adding in the kind of, diagnostic testing that we do. I think that is what really kind of ties it together. And then, of course, the kind of different movement protocols that we offer as well, as you, of course, would rightly know more about.
Yeah, that's right. And we are all about personalized treatment approaches. One solution doesn't fit everybody. So you have to take a very comprehensive journey detail of a person and then try to make bundles that would suit every individual better. For example, somebody above the age of 45 would benefit from a different recipe than somebody around the age of 35. So, for example, a common bundle would be personalized nutrition if we are tackling blood sugar levels. Also, metabolic support with IV therapies can come in very handy. And exercise regimes around EMS training is a wonderful way to build up your muscle mass and keep your metabolic flexibility in place and to hold on to the gains that you've achieved in the longer run. And also, obviously, a detox, contrast therapy always makes a good part of any approach that we go with.
Right. I think absolutely well said, because when I look at the kind of, patient profiles that we have seen and we've looked at and reviewed, and how do we kind of build up the protocols for them to make sure that they're getting the right results. When we look at something like EMS training and IV drip therapy in combination together, works really well to handle not only the nutritional deficiencies that someone is concerned with, whether it's their kind of micronutrient profile, and then helping them, of course, with a nutrition workshop and a nutrition profile as well that works in their favor, works with their diet and with their dietary restrictions, whatever they might be, and works for their benefit, right? Combine that with something like an EMS training to help them with gaining that muscle faster, with burning off those excess calories, getting to a more active lifestyle. I think these are the kind of things that really kind of give people the right motivation and push in the right direction. So I think that's some really great information for all of our listeners and for all of our viewers. I think as far as a deep dive on mastering blood sugar, I think Dr. Nivedita and Dr. Srishti have been super helpful. And of course, here at the Wellness Co, we're really focused on helping people reverse the risk of diabetes, right? We see a lot of people who are coming in who are already suffering from type 2 diabetes or are pre-diabetic and are really worried about what the future kind of holds for them. And for the maximum amount of people out there who might be concerned about something like this occurring for them in the future, we recommend them to take steps early, handle their kind of, let's say blood sugar requirements and regulation needs as soon as possible, and talk to an expert and talk to a doctor to figure out what kind of wellness protocol is right for them and how they can get on the journey to long-term health. A couple of things that we're doing now, which we're super excited about, is of course integrating wearable technologies such as CGM patches and sleep rings to monitor people's blood sugar and blood glucose levels on a daily basis, monitor their sleep as well on a daily basis, monitor their workouts on a daily basis. I think these are a few things that can help people really stay motivated and kind of keep to the journey and keep to the path of long-term health. So thank you so much to Dr. Srishti and Dr. Nivedita for joining us today. And please stay tuned to the Wellness Blueprint for more.